Hello, everybody. Welcome into Commodity Culture, where our goal is to make you a better investor in the commodities sector. My name is Jesse Day, and on this episode, I'm very excited to welcome Dave Collum to the program. A market commentator, professor of chemistry at Cornell University, and a man very outspoken against prevailing narratives on a variety of topics, we're going to tap into Dave's counterculture views on the state of the broad market, where he's been calling for a decades-long bear market up ahead. How close does he think we are to the beginning of the end? We're going to talk about platinum, a metal he's previously been very bullish on and that has played out according to his thesis. Is it still early days or time to take profits? We are, of course, going to dive into a bunch of controversial topics that will trigger you, including the big beautiful bill, Musk's new political party, the war on free speech in the West, and so much more. Before we dive in, Commodity Culture now has merch. Get your hat, t-shirt, hoodie, or mug, all backed by a 100% quality guarantee using the link in the description below. And now, my friends, strap yourselves in for my conversation with Dave Collum. Well, let's kick things off by talking about the broad market. We saw it correct fairly meaningfully in the initial aftermath of the Trump tariff announcement. We've now staged quite a recovery. Seems like things are back to business as usual. Both the NASDAQ and the S&P 500 have hit new all-time highs. It should be noted year to date, not a big rise, but overall, nonetheless, new all-time highs for both indices. Trump even announcing close to the bottom that now would be a good time to buy, and it turns out he was right. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on this year's price action in the broad market and how you think things could play out.
Well, I'm becoming distrustful of anything that's being presented as factual. So to call it a correction, again, requires that it correct something, and it obviously corrected nothing. To ultimately correct the markets, you have to correct price and you have to correct attitude, and attitude has been persistently ridiculous for many years. I will tell wonks out there who like to post plots, quit posting plots back to 2020. It tells me you're a 20-something in a cubicle who doesn't know their ass from a hole in the ground. You want to post a plot, go back to 1950 like Jesse Felder or something like that. So Jesse Felder has a new actual composite valuation metric, which is like some other composite ones I've seen, but he just created himself equal weighted, Case-Shiller, Buffett, and Tobin's Q, and I think one other. And we're at all-time highs. We're at outlandish highs. And if you take the mean, we're at 130% over historical average valuation. But that historical average valuation going back to 1950 is so profoundly influenced by the last 40 years that if he took his metric back to 1900 and used that as a baseline, we'd be 200% over historical average valuation based on Case-Shiller PE says that. So we're at ridiculous levels. Very few people actually put a number on it. They like hyperbolic phrases like ridiculous levels, but I like to put a number. I put 200%, which means we're looking at a 66% correction, assuming that record high profit margins don't shrink, assuming that interest rates don't rise, assuming that there's no damage done taking out 66%, 70% of the stock market, assuming that we don't hit a recession, right? That just gets a historical average valuation without any other ancillary events. And so what's disturbing about the markets to me, and it's Chris Irons posted something on Zero Hedge yesterday, and I reached out to him and said, I share your pain. He said, just nothing makes sense anymore. And he actually is slowing down his podcast. Then he wanted a podcast last night to talk about it. So there's a kind of a knee-jerk reflex. But so the markets seem completely and utterly unresponsive to things that used to influence markets. And I'm not talking about tariffs. I'm just talking about the fact that there's no connection whatsoever to fundamentals. And someday there will be. And when that happens, I think because the markets have been so inelastically positive, to use, again, I think that's a phrase Felder likes to use, inelastic, or Mike Green, um, then when it finally breaks the other way, it's going to be an inelastic fracture. It's going to be like dropping, crystalline goblet on your tile floor. And Mike Green seems to think that he calls it the giant, what do you call it? The giant blob or something? The giant something or other, where it's the steady flows of passive investing, where it not only doesn't pay attention to valuation, but it actually puts more money into the higher valued stocks, right? And so it's anti-valuation, basically. I mentioned to Mike years ago that I had a chance to chat with Jack Bogle, and I asked him something to the effect, I said, isn't it true that passive, and I didn't call it passive investing because that's kind of a newer term, but isn't it true that that indexing is removing the big money managers who used to play the role? Let's say you ran a pension fund and it was actively managed. You used to walk into the office of some S&P 500 company's corporate headquarters, or you'd be on a conference call with the CEO talking about the quarterly earnings or whatever. And you'd say, look, dude, you're running your company like shit. We're going to sell our shares if you don't get your act together, right? So people were activist investors. And now with passive investing, activist investing is non-existent. And so I asked Jack that. I said, doesn't it take the adult supervision out of the markets? And therefore the companies don't have anyone to answer to at all. And the answer is yes. And so, and he said yes. And Green actually said that's why he's conflicted about Bogle's role in history, that particular problem. And so I think the markets are profoundly broken. I had occasion to read my 2013 and 2014 annual reviews. And if you think about it, it's like so far back in the markets, right? I mean, the markets have gone bananas since 2013 and 14. And I made, in my opinion, a coherent, compelling, almost unassailable case that the markets were ridiculous, including quotes from, Grant Williams and Druckenmiller and all sorts of guys saying these markets are ridiculous. This was back in 2013, and they've become nothing but more ridiculous. And so you're hearing a bit of sourness because I can't buy them and I can't invest in them. And I don't have to, unfortunately. I'm in a pretty good position. But it, just like so many other things, take the younger generation. They're forced to buy houses that are overpriced. They're forced to buy cars that are overpriced. They're forced to buy investments that are overpriced. I think the interest rates are too low, not too high. The guys who are calling for Powell to reduce the rates, I go, what kind of clown are you? I think you're an idiot, actually. I think I don't give a shit how leveraged you are. Here's the problem with interest rates. Interest rates are sufficiently low that it is still profitable for private equity to buy a company, load it with debt, strip it of its assets, sell the shell to some unsuspecting pension fund, and make a profit. And as long as it's profitable, and according to Gretchen Morgensen, with a 47% probability that company will go bankrupt. And so if you can still make money doing that, then monetary policy is too loose because it means that capital is too easy to get. This shouldn't be a profitable venture. So I would say the markets are horrifically. Now, at some point I'll be right and they'll say, oh, stop clock, right twice a day. I go, how about when that stop clock blows your ass off? Do you think maybe you ought to pay attention to what time it's reading, right? And when was the last time that stop clock hit the right time? And if it's been a long time, which it has, then maybe that explosion is going to be. It's like someone saying, hey, there's no problem with flooding. Where was that flood this week? Where was that? Out in Texas?
Texas, yeah.
Yeah, that was a floodplain they were camping on. That was a floodplain, right? And it turns out I've got an article that I happened to run across from the 1970s where a bunch of Christian kids at a camp died from getting drowned by a flood in that same place. And so they said, well, it has happened in a long time ago. You think maybe that's not the hint that it's due?
Yeah, that's a really good
And
point.
well, it's a Silas Marner quote. Sometimes it is often stated that the absence of something is evidence that it won't happen when it's actually evidence that it's imminent. We haven't had an earthquake in California in a long time. I go, well, you're about to lose your ass then, right?
Yeah.
Because these things have to happen. Oh, look, the snow's been building up there. There's still no avalanche. What's to worry about? Well, you're going to get one now, aren't you? So any system that's displaced from equilibrium for a long time that isn't allowed to equilibrate will eventually destroy lives.
And now a quick break to hear from our sponsor, ARC Silver Gold Osmium owner Ian Everard is considered one of the most honest and level-headed gold and silver dealers in the United States, praised even by his competitors. So give him a call today to take advantage of the specials right now. Silver Kangaroos 2023 1-ounce coins, mint fresh, only $2.47 over spot. Mint fresh silver maple leafs 2025 coins, 1 ounce, $2.87 over spot. While supplies last. Reach out today at 307-264-9441 or by email at ian@arcsgo.com, and make sure to tell him that Commodity Culture sent you. And now, back to the interview. Yeah, a very interesting summary. I do want to touch on platinum as well, because this is a metal that you've discussed before on this show. You thought it was undervalued. Your thesis appears to be playing out. Where are we at, in your opinion, when it comes to this potential platinum bull run? It's up about 50% in a single month. Do you think it's still early days for platinum? Is it time to take profits off the table? Obviously, commodities are very volatile. Even if it does continue to go up, we're going to see corrections along the way. But what are your overall thoughts on the platinum market right now?
So I've owned a tiny bit of platinum for many, many years. So small that if it went to zero, I wouldn't necessarily close in the green that day, in the red that day, right? I mean, it could zero out, and one gold miner would overcome the platinum. So it's a token gesture to keep it on my radar. And around March, I started asking the question, what would it take for platinum to actually catch people's attention? Because it's been flatlined for 10 years. And that came off a high before that. So it's been flatlined after a high. So it's basing, or whatever you want to call it. And I've been watching PPLT, and that was at about, so it's a little different than the price of platinum, but it's close. So PPLT was running around $900, and I reached out to some like Peter Brandt and said, here's a chart. What would get you excited? And I reached out to other technical analysts, because here's what happens now. In the olden days, like when I was a gold bull in 1999, I had from 99 to 2003 to average my ass into gold without it running away from me. And then it went from, my cost basis, believe it or not, of gold is something like $220 an ounce for the cheapest gold that I bought. And I bought up to around 457, but $220 an ounce, because it was my first purchases were gold in a closed-end fund that was trading something like 28% below NAV, and no one wanted it, right? It was just garbage, and the Bank of England was selling all their gold, and so in any event, so I averaged in over about 4 years and still made a ton of money off that. Then what happens is, so now you get interested in platinum. And what I know is in the modern markets with social media and stuff, you're going to be given about 15 minutes to catch it, and it'll run away from you. So I set sort of a price target. I said around 96, I'm going to start buying. And I'm still not up to a good position at all. But I started buying it every time it hit a new high. I like to buy highs, not lows. I'd rather have everything in the green that I've bought to date. How's that? And I started buying, and I bought about 5 or 6 slugs on its way up to 128. Now it's down to 122, and I'll just patiently wait till 15 minutes from now when it's 1:30. Um, and um, but that's, I don't buy it as a momentum play. But what I did is I put on hyper accelerated mode averaging in play, because one of the paradoxes that I face is that as a boomer who's done well for himself, it turns out when I look at the quantity of the percentage I ought to own of something to be significant. I mean, if you buy a 0.5% of your assets in platinum, I don't give a shit how good a call it was. It doesn't do you any good. I should have just bought NVIDIA for 15 minutes. And then at the same time, when I look at, okay, so what's a reasonable percentage? I don't know, 5% of your assets, if you're really convinced platinum's a good idea. And then I do the math on how much platinum I have to buy to be 5%. I go, I can't spend that much money on platinum. So it's a paradox. So it feels like a huge amount of money. And at the same time, it's not a huge percentage. And so I'm forcing myself to spend what feels like big quantities of money because I'm inherently a cheapskate. Now, what's the bullish case for platinum? Well, the EVs, I think, suck. I think they're going to go away because I think at some point politicians are going to stop forcing them down our throats. And I think the hybrid is going to be the optimum technology. Well, it turns out because hybrids use their catalytic converter, which has platinum in it, less and less frequently than it inherently runs colder, and so it turns out the hybrids use more platinum than internal combustion engines. So there's a starting point. So if we stop at hybrids, then platinum consumption for industrial use goes up, not down. There are things like various green energy technologies like oh God, I don't want to try to name them, but there's some that use platinum, fuel cells, things like that.
Right.
And so there's a bullish case for platinum. If you look at the above ground supply, and I've checked this from several sources, and this is almost mind boggling to me. At the current rate of underproduction, so we're in depletion at this point, and at the current rate of underproduction and the current above ground supply of platinum, we got about 8 months. And I've seen numbers as high as 2 years, but that's not exactly warehouses of platinum waiting to destroy the market, waiting for the bank of who the hell cares, trying to decimate the price of platinum. So if the short sellers try to find themselves on the wrong side, the physical platinum market is so thin that, one hedge fund manager could, at the current prices, could scoop it all up. There's something like $9 billion worth of platinum in the world. And so I think it's more bullish. Platinum has historically been higher priced than gold. It's currently sitting at, $1,300 per ounce. And gold is what, $3,300 right now. So it's a very bullish case. It's based on fundamentals bullish case, and based on modern market operation, you have to buy quickly. And the other thing is, when platinum started to run, when PPLT started to run, the volume went up almost immediately. So you look at the little volume spikes along the bottom for 10 years, don't give a shit. And then all of a sudden, when it hit about 96 was sort of my start to buy point, much bigger volumes, 5, 6, 10-fold increases in volume per day. And so this was only about a month and a half ago that this started. So platinum right now is playing out well. So my first purchase of platinum is, up 30, 40%, something like that.
Let's talk about the big, beautiful bill now officially being passed. Trump signs it at the White House with military planes flying overhead and fireworks on the 4th of July. I think this is one of the most insane in-your-face displays of blatant propaganda I've ever seen. I don't know, maybe I'm off here. What do you make of the whole spectacle and the bill itself? Is it really going to benefit Americans? Obviously, Elon furious about it. We're going to get into him going off and forming his own political party in just a moment. But first, your thoughts on the bill and its potential implications for the economy in the U.S.
Well, I heard that Elon said that was totally fake news, that he had no intention of starting a new party. I heard that this morning, so who knows? The big, beautiful bill. Of course, it depends who you ask. One of the claims is, so I got into it with Luong one day in a 3 or 4 way podcast where he was wildly supportive, and we have to pass it to buy Trump the time to do what Trump's got to do. And I took the other side. I said, look, I have been told since my entire life that we'll worry about the deficit later. And it's just not, it's time to worry about the deficit. And the whole Doge thing was phenomenal until you realize that we're never actually going to save any money. And so I'm really despondent over that. And it's possible. I've heard rumors that the new fiscal year doesn't have an effect till something like October, so that we can't save money till October, something like that. But the big beautiful bill looks like it's going to add a ton to the deficit. I've seen people claim that it really is just Trump's tax breaks from the past reinstated, but I didn't like his tax breaks in the past. I don't buy this model that, and I know no one wants to pay taxes. I can't. I'm not supporting paying tax. I'm not supporting tax the rich, but I don't buy the model that by cutting taxes, we're going to have this booming economy and it's going to more than pay for itself. That's right up there with, by bombing the shit out of Iraq, the oil is going to pay for the cost of the war. It didn't work, and so I reached a saturation point where I said, look, it is time to goddamn cut the deficit. It's time to goddamn cut. We've discovered the spending's out of control. It is now time to cut it. Now, I would be happy to compromise and say every single penny that you cut from the budget, you get to give a tax break, even though we're in deficit spending. So you hold the annual deficit fixed. And so, like, for example, I wanted them to dump FEMA, and then they dumped FEMA, and I was so excited. FEMA's $29 billion abortion. And then, it was about a week ago, Pam Bondi made some reference to FEMA being on some task. I go, wait a minute. You said you guys dumped FEMA. Why am I hearing about FEMA again? Because FEMA really is worthless. And I've done my homework on that. It is worthless. And so $29 down the tubes, get that back, give $29 billion worth of tax breaks. I'd be okay with that. It doesn't solve the deficit problem, but it keeps it from getting bigger. And then you can kind of inflate it away, right? If you can hold the deficit at X trillions of dollars, but never let it grow in nominal dollars, then the inflation, I don't buy the idea you can inflate your way out of debt. I think that's a farce. So I don't think cutting, and where does that come from? Well, it comes from back when Kennedy was in office, and the upper tax bracket was 90%. Well, then you cut taxes. Maybe you're going to get some economic growth, right? But you're not going to get it in the current situation. People bitch about the interest rates. I go, the interest rates aren't high, right? The question I like to ask, I might have asked you before, if I said, here's a 30-year treasury, and here are the rules. You got to buy it. You got to hold it. You can't hedge it. You're buying it for the revenue. What interest rate would you demand? You don't know what inflation's going to do. You don't know what's going to happen in the world. It's an unknown. You're pretty sure the treasury will still be there in 30 years. That's probably a safe bet. But what interest rate would you demand based on all the unknowns that we don't have? And I sure as hell guarantee you it's not 5%.
No, for me,
if you had to put it in a lockbox,
I would say.
Yeah, easily. And if that number is wrong, it's wrong on the low side.
Yeah.
Right? And so it means that the bonds are not being priced correctly. And people say, well, you don't buy them to hold them. And I go, someone does. Someone's got to hold those bonds. And, they bitch about Janet Yellen selling short-term bonds, short-term debt instead of long-term when interest rates were super low. And I know she did it because because they didn't have a market. They knew they couldn't find buyers for the 30-year bonds, right? And Besson's doing it again now. So they've conceded that they can't sell the long-term debt at the rates they want it to be at. They'll drive the rates up like crazy. But I have a moral problem with the idea of artificially driving rates to zero and then selling that debt to a bunch of suckers, right? Silicon Valley Bank went bankrupt, right? Why did it go bankrupt? it bought too many treasuries? How is that a sane world? If you had told me 10 years ago a bank would go bankrupt because it bought too many treasuries,
Yeah.
right? But if they bought too many treasuries at a price that was insane, what else are they going to buy? NVIDIA, right? And so I would say it's time to sort of put up or shut up. It's time to fix the system. And Trump was supposed to be that guy. That's who we voted for, right? Even if you didn't vote for him, that is what you should say. Well, I know I hate the guy, but at least we're going to get this. We're not getting this. I'm pissed off. Now, maybe Trump is playing 9D chess because everything makes no sense, right? Does anything make sense to you? Tell me anything. There's almost no facts that you can take at face value without wondering if someone's lying their ass off to you.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And it feels like Trump is kind of just taking random advice from a bunch of people in his cabinet and then, okay, we'll implement your idea today. And then, yeah, your idea sounds good. It seems very chaotic.
See, I can't figure out, for example, what's going on with the university financing. I should be able to figure this out. I've heard Harvard's frozen solid on it.
Interesting.
Now, it is conceivable. There are people out there, and you'd have a tough time making an unassailable case against this, that universities need to get their asses kicked. Right? We have grown into a blob, right? And that is going to piss off some people at Cornell, but our English department, which, by the way, there's no more journalism. People do audiobooks, there's no evidence that learning how to write well makes a difference. AI will fill in the gaps. So to my dismay, because I think writing is really important, because writing is thinking. It's thinking coherently, right? But there's very little evidence that the demand for writing is going to go up. Our English department has 48 faculty. Seems like it's time to trim that, right? Sociology, if you're going to pay $300,000 for an education in an elite school, you better not major in sociology. And I got sociology colleagues who, if they hear this, they're going to shit their fucking pants, but they can. One could argue the entire concept of arts and sciences is a bit anachronistic. I've got colleagues in the sciences who think we ought to split the two. And the reason they won't is because then the arts is gone, just gone, right? They've been living off the sciences. And even the sciences aren't a cash cow. So maybe Trump is not, maybe he's not just, shut down the spigot to the universities and then forgotten about it. And then, or doesn't know how to turn it on or whatever. I was told by a trustee, they send people down to DC to chat, and they can't find who to talk to. They don't know who to talk to. They don't know who's driving the cab. Now, if you got in the Oval Office, you're talking to one of the guys, right? But it's short of falling in the Oval Office, I'm told you run into people go, we don't know what's going on. So there seems to be no on switch. Now, the other problem that Harvard's going to face, Harvard being the pinnacle of scorn, is that I've seen claims that their endowment, which no one understands endowments. I mean, no, people understand endowments. The people in the popular press don't understand endowments. I can tell you about endowments. But Harvard's endowment has always been very speculative, and I've heard numbers anywhere from 40 to 85% private equity. That means that Harvard's 50 billion might be 25 billion, because they don't have to mark anything to market, and they don't when they don't have to, right? So that $100 million office building that you couldn't sell for 10 million is on the books for 100 million. And I guarantee you Harvard's endowment's got all sorts of shit all the way from timberland and Ukraine to you name it. And because they run it like a hedge fund. They run it like a private equity fund, actually, but they buy private equity funds, which themselves buy private equity funds, which means the fees are gutting them like fish. So Harvard, the endowments, the pension funds, everything could be worth half of what they're said to be worth. when the private debt market collapses, when private equity collapses, when the private capital disappears. Notice the word private keeps appearing. Why private? Because you get to hide shit. Private means you hid the risk. That word is always associated with hidden risk.
So speaking of hidden risk, let's segue over to Elon Musk and his new America Party. Now, you mentioned you'd heard that he had no intention potentially of forming one, but I believe it is official. He did post on X, "Today the America Party is formed to give you back your freedom." Whatever
Okay,
that means. Like
then
what
what
a
I read
word to
was
just
fake
use.
news. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So
here's the deal.
yeah.
Elon could either be a total deep stater. It could be that his whole affiliation with Trump was teeing Trump up for failure. It could be that Elon had the right idea and that he's now frustrated with Trump. It could be any combination of anything. I'm not convinced that all the fights they had were necessarily even real. They sure looked like professional wrestling on a bad day, less convincing sometimes. And as a consequence, we really have no idea what they're doing. And Trump thrives in the chaos. And so if you somehow think you understand the world, then you probably ought to, get some Prozac or something, because I don't think it's that easy to understand. I was listening to Scott Horton the other day. There's a guy who seems to understand the world, actually, staggeringly good, actually. But the world is so complicated. And the 2013-14 year in review that I had to reread for obscure reasons, the world seems so much simpler. And I think the reason that it's a mess is because the propaganda machines, since in the last dozen years, have mastered the digital world. Mike Benz mentioned that, by the way. He said that around 13, the deep state realized that they had to get control of the narrative better, that they were losing it in the digital world. And so before, I think it was relatively simple. Stories would break. Zero Hedge would tell a story that was really interesting. Zero Hedge now looks like it's purely corporate, right? The
And
stories
very
are,
pro-Trump, I've found as well.
yeah, but they've always been sort of anti-left, and so I'm okay with that. But they used to be ahead of the story, and now it looks like a bunch of Wall Street analyses of asset classes. I wish they'd go back to the old days when there were 20 comments, and I'm thinking, boy, these guys are really smart. I should keep track of this site. This is a pretty good site. So. So you don't know what's happening, right? This America, and if Trump really is boning it, right? Let's say that our concerns, and there's people listening saying, "I told you so." I go, dude, let me point out to you that if not Trump, then nobody. Some of us really, I think the cultish support for Trump stems in part from the fact that he was perceived to be the only guy for which we had at least a finite chance of getting change. And if it turns out there's no chance getting change because he's no good either, then it's over, in my opinion. Then we're just heading down some sewer, and eventually we will pay the price. You can't. These are unsustainable paths we're on. And so we were really hoping that we'd finally elected a guy who seemed to be so crazy that he didn't care what people really thought. A narcissist who doesn't care. What an odd combo. And yet now you can't tell. I hate to turn on him because I hate to be a fair weather friend, but if they're just not doing. You read articles that say that that Kennedy, who I thought was the most predictable appointment of them all, I said, if Kennedy gets appointed, we know what he wants to do. And he's not doing it. And he's not going to cancel pharmaceutical advertisements on TV, and he's not going to cancel vaccines. He's not making progress. There's a thing. The Maha thing, which I think is not a crazy idea, because I'm not a thin guy. I like to eat. but I went out on the 4th of July, and I'm thin compared to those people. And it's really, I mean, we really are sick. And I'm 70, so I keel over from a heart attack, BFD. But when you're 25 years old and you're 50 pounds past the dad bod, you got a problem. And so that's not crazy, but we didn't hire Kennedy to take food coloring out of our Fruit Loops. We got Kennedy in there to wrestle the real corruption, the pharmaceutical corruption. And I'm not sure we're getting it. Now, I could be just giving up too quickly. Could be. The Department of Justice is disappointing because it keeps announcing crap. And I'm going, you guys should just shut up. I want you to be quietly building cases. I want you not be talking about shit. I want you to be building cases and then announce that you're about to hang some bad guy by their balls. Right? Did he just get off, basically?
Yes, he got acquitted of the he was found
stuff.
not guilty of the big stuff, the RICO charges, and he was found guilty for 2 charges that I believe combined carry a total of a maximum of 10 years. They will probably be appealed, or which means 0 years and some kind of whatever community service, house arrest, whatever you want to call it. Some way to get off. I mean, the prosecutor that handled the case was the same prosecutor in the Ghislaine Maxwell trial, ironically, who has access supposedly to the Epstein files
daughter.
as well.
Comey's
yes,
daughter.
That's right. Yes, that's right. Yeah. So, I mean, come on, guys. What did people expect was going to happen?
So, and I know we've got other stuff to talk about for Rumble, but so it means that whole thing was a farce.
Yeah.
There are plenty of people out there like Whitney Webb and stuff who've made critical connections to show that, just based on what's supposedly happened to Justin Bieber, you could put Diddy away for 40 years. Just Justin Bieber.
Yeah.
Right? And heaven only knows. And of course, there's all the tapes and stuff that he supposedly has that we're never going to see. We're never going to see the 41,000 hours of J6. We're never going to see any of this stuff.
Yeah, it's disappointing. And I mean, look as well, you were talking about RFK not really doing what he said he was going to do. What about Tulsi Gabbard, put in charge of intelligence, and she's saying we see no signs that Iran is anywhere close to having a nuclear weapon. And then she goes silent and they all start screaming they're about to build the bomb. We have to attack them now. It's been truly bizarre. I want to move on to the latest political savior in your neck of the woods, at least close to it, Zoran Mamdani. You posted about him on X. If NYC elects this commie dog, y'all will get what you deserve. It's funny because I recently interviewed Ed Dowd. We were talking about this. I referred to him as a communist, and I got attacked in the comments by people saying, he's not a communist. He's a democratic socialist, you idiot. Don't you get the difference? I mean, you put lipstick on a pig, it's still a pig, right?
We don't care, right?
Yeah.
There's no equivalent to commie dog in democratic socialists. So
right.
Commie dog works. And some of his tweets are extraordinary. A funny one that I saw, a funny meme, says that he was going to destroy the Twin Towers to build affordable housing. So he seems as though he is emblematic of a total incurable rot to me. Now, the rot may mean that it's because there's not really elections and he's going to get in there, and maybe he's not going to get elected. But the fact that he's even in the news, the fact that he could get headlines from anybody, right? I mean, that's like Jeffrey Dahmer's running for mayor of New York, right? I mean, it just makes no sense. And so if he gets elected, then then New York, you can write him off as far as I'm concerned. But it all could be just deep state shenanigans. This is really this total sense that I can't figure out what's going on, and I used to think I could. I have a podcast coming, which I've been thinking about hard. because it's a big one. No offense, Jesse. It got put off 3 friggin' times. I got delayed. I was supposed to go on May 19th and July 2nd and July 12th. And now I'm scheduled for July 15th. And it's Tucker Carlson.
Wow.
And I'm sitting there going, what the fuck am I doing on that podcast? And I keep thinking, is it possible I'm being duped by someone and that's not his booking agent, but she's got the right email. Googling tells me she is, but I've been thinking about what to talk about. And there's a tremendous number of topics for which I want to, if he gives me the ability to steer it, which I think he will, potential spam. Tons of topics I want to ask him. I want to ask him where the 41,000 hours of tape went. I want to talk to him about the Vegas shootings, which he knows a lot about. I want to talk to him about 9/11. I want to talk to him about, I'm happy to talk to him about Israel, which has been a fairly quiet subject for me because I don't want to die. I've got a dozen. Ukraine. I've got dozens of things I want to talk to him about where where we kept crossing paths, him not noticing me, but me sure as hell noticing him. And I also want to ask him how the hell he noticed me. I'm trying to figure that out. So in any event, I don't know why I mentioned that.
Well, you're previewing this huge appearance on Tucker Carlson. That's amazing.
But it's made me think about. So I write, as you know, a year in review. I write it once a year. You can't market a blog worse than that, right? You really can't. You really, that's not exactly putting up steady content. And I've been thinking about it though, and I realized that if every week or every, twice a week, and I'm going to offend all the bloggers now, if I wrote a blog every week, it would be garbage. And the reason it would be garbage is because I haven't had time to think about it. So I'd be writing about, the flood or something. I'd be writing about, and it's often the case that the idea sort of gets into your skull. And then over time, because of various tweets and various articles, and you pick up stuff on the fly, the plot either thickens or dissipates. So if I'd written a blog about Trump, if I'd written blogs about Trump for the last 6 months, they'd all be garbage. Every last one of them would be just total nonsense. And so I realized that the beauty of writing one a year is that it gives me a chance for ideas to either evolve or dissipate. And some things just become irrelevant. Some things all of a sudden. So I listen to Liz Collum on Tucker. I've been listening to Tucker podcasts for a reason now. And she talked about the fall of Minneapolis. She talked about George Floyd and Chauvin's conviction. And it was great because I'd written a ton on those. And I really think I nailed it to the point where they didn't mention some really important stuff that I thought should have been mentioned. And I intend to reach out to her at some point and send her what I'd written and saying, and by the way, you might be entertained to read this, but Chauvin never should have been convicted. If you watch you want to get yourself mad, watch the documentary, which I had watched before and then watched again recently, The Fall of Minneapolis, produced by Liz Collum. You will be furious. You'll be furious at how corrupt the judicial system was required to convict Chauvin. And I wrote, in the premise I wrote, I didn't want to say he didn't deserve to be convicted. I took a slightly safer angle. I said, here is why a conviction will be hard, which is a way of not shouldering the risk but the judge should be in prison for 40 years for how he handled the case. I'd sign off on him just going away for the rest of his life based on the way he handled the case. It was that bad. It was treasonous levels of judicial misconduct. And so watch The Fall of Minneapolis. Your blood will boil.
I just wrote it down. I'm going to check it out. I want to talk about the escalating crackdowns on free speech in a number of so-called Western democracies. The German police recently raiding people's homes for posting things online, including insulting politicians. The UK obviously continuing to jail people for social media posts as well. Some people have also raised concern in the US about anti-Semitism laws potentially encroaching on free speech. We've seen these pro-Palestine protests get
They're not
shut down.
encroaching on free speech. Anti-Semitism laws are defying free speech.
Okay, well, we'll talk to us about it.
Well, you get to say whatever you want as long as it's not libelous, right? I was told by a lawyer once, never call a person a liar, call him a weasel, call him a scoundrel, call him a scumball, call him something that's not provably false or true, right? A liar, you can say, aha, now you got to prove he lied, so no, everyone has the right to be anti-Semitic and racist, and you can lose your job because of it and things like that. But there should be no punishment for that. And then, we tend to think of us as like just a carbon copy of Great Britain, and it's not true. The British have a bigger problem. Of course, I'm in a Zoom group with a couple of Brits, and they think we have a problem. I said, no, we think. A couple of the Americans said, no, we think Britain's got a worse problem than we have. But anti-Semitism laws have no place in society, in under our Constitution. That's not to say you should be anti-Semitic. But so my gag order on Israel is slowly but surely getting lifted. I'm getting increasingly impatient with Netanyahu. And by the way, I should be able to criticize Netanyahu and criticize the Israeli government without being called an anti-Semite.
Oh, of course.
If you want to call me an anti-Semite, right? Well, they've been doing this for half a century, right? This is a standard protocol. But you want to call me an anti-Semite for criticizing Netanyahu, you might lose some teeth. And what I would do to you would be illegal. So you can, sticks and stones will break my bones, right? So you can call me an anti-Semite. It's not to say I'm not going to punch your face in, and take the beating. I don't know. I'll probably get time served. No, I think it's. I'm getting tired of this. I'm getting tired of the oppression of free speech. I want to be able to criticize Israel. My brother's nervous about it, and I said, "Well, Ned, not chiming in on Israel, which I've avoided. I read so many books in the Middle East, I concluded I don't understand it. I'll never catch Scott Horton. I'll never understand it. And I'm not convinced Scott might not even understand it, but he sure has a lot of facts at his fingertips. But I said it's cowardly to put a gag order on that story. So as Dave Smith would say, if you know that there's a Hamas guy in an apartment complex, do you get to destroy the complex to get him? The answer is no. You don't. And you can say, well, we do. And I go, okay, but if we blow your fucking heads off, don't be surprised, right? So yeah, I'm going to write a little about Israel this year. I'll be careful, more careful than now maybe, but probably not.
And any thoughts on the German police raid and what's going on in the UK right now as well?
Put the swastikas on, go for the gold. Europe is a clusterfuck. Europe is a not right. They've been involved in tribal warfare since the beginning of written civilization, right? The Germania, the German tribes, right? Even the Romans couldn't conquer those bastards, and so no one should be shocked that Europe's going to shit. They go to shit about every half century. So they're going to shit again. They're going to go to shit by going at Putin. They're going to eat it. They're going to think they can take on Putin, and they're going to find out they can't. Because Russians know how to suffer. They really know how to suffer. And Europeans currently don't. Well, so I'm in a Zoom group that has some very interesting people on it. And we had an MEP from Great Britain Ron Johnson, Bobby Kennedy. We've had some very elite people. We had a woman who was a parliamentarian from Sweden, and I asked her. I said, from across the pond, we get news that we don't know if it's true. Is it true that that Sweden is now the most dangerous country in Europe? And the answer is, she said, yes, it is. And it's because of all the North Africans that got imported into Sweden for reasons that don't make sense. Now you can say, well, the Swedes are loving, caring, whatever. And I go, but they're not stupid, right? The leaders of Sweden had to have known that that would lead to a catastrophe. They had to have known. Islam and Christianity have been banging heads for millennia, right? This is and the assimilation of North Africans into Europe has always been a challenge, right? And it doesn't require that one side be guilty, one side be innocent. It's just oil and water. They don't mix well, and right now we're seeing it in Syria, right? So we tried to knock off Syria over and over and over, and finally we got Assad out of there, and now it's a slaughterhouse. They should be proud of themselves. They have, what we kill, because since 9/11, the U.S. has been involved in an estimated 5 million deaths in the Middle East. Why is that not called a Holocaust?
Yeah, exactly.
This is where Dave Smith comes in, right? This is where guys like Dave Smith are really doing some very heavy lifting for society.
Well, Dave, this has been a fantastic conversation. We are going to jump over to the Rumble platform to talk about the Epstein files. Is Trump on them? Maybe talk a little bit about the Diddy trial and how that could be connected as well. Search Commodity Culture on Rumble to find it. We don't post the links on YouTube. There's some risk to that due to YouTube's policies. But for now, Dave, tell us about your year in review, where people can find that, your X account, anywhere else you want to direct people online.
Well, it's my pinned tweet. It's a Peak Prosperity, where I publish it every year since 2009. And it is a summary of the year's events that caught my eye, that I think I can bring something to the story. So I try not to write about stuff that everyone else has written about, or at least from an angle that everyone's written about. And unless I can somehow find a way in that I think so I think my analysis of the 2016 elections was actually really good. So I wrote it. I think my analysis of the Ukraine war was really good, and so I wrote it. And but I try to pick up on other things, things that just don't make sense or aberrant. And Bob Moriarty, a gold bug, seems to have decided that it is his job, that he and his editor are going to hard bind all 15-ish year in reviews. So we've done 09 to 12, 22, 23, 24, 13, 14, I think is uploaded now. And then we got some stuff to fill in there in the middle. And it'll be an anthology. It's going to be about 3 feet wide. And again, one of the reasons I write it is because you get to the end of the year and it all just goes by, right? It's like if you never took a photo of your kids or something, you'd forget what they look like. And so I write it to kind of capture the year before it goes down the memory hole. And when I read them, I go, because I have to copy edit it again. I go, oh wow, that's I've forgotten all about that. I really wrote that. Okay. So in any case, I'm going to write about, this year is going to have a heavy pedophilia, child trafficking component. I've been working on it for 3 years, incubating, pondering, thinking about it. I've been on Zoom calls with victims of trafficking and with spooks involved in trafficking. And I think I'm going to finally write it this year. And everyone's been hounding me because I always say I'm going to put in a final section and then it never shows up because I'm just not ready. I'm going to try to do it this year.
Awesome. I'm going to put a link to your X account in the description below. People can both follow you and read your year-end review. And speaking of human trafficking and those sort of dark topics, we're going to take this over to Rumble. Search commodity culture on Rumble to find that video. Dave, I'll see you there.
Glad to join you.
Thank you for joining us today. Take advantage of ARC Silver, Gold, Osmium specials. Right now, Silver Kangaroos, 2023 1-ounce coins, only $2.47 over spot. Silver Maple Leafs, 2025 1-ounce coins, only $2.87 over spot. While supplies last. Contact owner Ian Everard today at 307-264-9441 or by email at ian@arcsgo.com, and make sure to tell him that Commodity Culture sent you. And I'll see you guys in the next episode. Commodity Culture is a series on commodities and natural resources. If you would like to see more, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification so you're always up to date with the latest episodes.